All right, welcome to RamView. It is 2022. It is the 18th day of February, and I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView. And thank you for clicking on, and thank you for the amazing couple days it's been in terms of subscribers and clicks when I haven't notified anybody because I wanted to see where I was at. And thank you for those that are faithfully clicking on and hopefully, again, building to something good. The plan is to be here Monday through Friday throughout the season and next season. And when I mean of season, I mean off season, summer season, regular season, postseason, and then back to this season, right? So anyway, thank you for clicking on. It is great to be here. And we're going to get into a lot of stuff. I think we've discovered that when we start talking about the things that are the low-hanging fruit stuff, the real easy stuff, the stuff you get on regular sports talk, we've discovered again, Twitter is a cesspool, right? Matthew Stafford was obviously inebriated, and as some people said it, whether it was his fault or not, it wasn't his fault. It was just a bad look the way he turned around. But I think the guy was in the middle of a consult from the good Dr. Jose Cuervo. And so I don't know if he was in a position to do anything. And then, of course, him and his wife have offered to pay the photographer's bills. You know what I'm talking about. The photographer, the lady that fell off the stage. Well, as everyone was bagging on Stafford, and then people wanted to come to Stafford's rescue, and they kind of lightly doxed this woman as the photographer and pulled out all of her Twitters and tweets from the last few years. She's a racist, she's this. And of course, Twitter, right? Going to the lowest common denominator. While Twitter can work really well, but there's always that stuff. And as some people said, move on, next, let it ride. As Yul Brynner said to Eli Wallach in Magnificent Seven, ride on, just get out of here, And it's so basically, you could live in that moment. You could waste time talking about that stuff. I'm amazed the airplay that stuff is that whole thing has gotten. And man, I don't care. I don't care. If indeed it was maybe, Stafford had a bad moment, had a bad look. Doesn't make him a bad person. Doesn't mean he did anything wrong and he wasn't required to pay this woman's bills. Move on. Okay. And I don't really care whether or not she was this or that. Why do we need to know? Right. Again, Twitter's a cesspool. It can be if you got to climb out of it and just go for the lowest stuff. I made a comment on Twitter the other day, and it didn't get bad. This was okay, but I mentioned that they had a 15-minute meeting between the MLB and the Players Association, and there really is no sense. I don't think any MLB and even their diehard fans, which I consider myself a diehard Major League Baseball fan, I don't think they have a sense of the world they're living in. This is an NFL world, and the NFL is gobbling up everything, and you better get back on the field. But the other aspect they're not really recognizing is because they are so married to their numbers and traditions and so many things. They're not recognizing, that the world is past them. 162 game season. We are not, I'm sorry, I'm a boomer. We are conditioned. The rest of the world is not conditioned any longer, the younger world, to stay invested for 162 games. They'll have it on their phone. They'll check, oh, cool, Dodgers won, and then they'll move on, as opposed to keeping their focus on it day to day, week to week. And I know a lot of people that play fantasy in terms they play fantasy sports just so they'll stay invested in the monotony of a 162 game season. I love it. I'm good with it. The problem is baseball seems like it's fading more and more and more. And I think there is something to a more compact schedule. And you know what? They really got to wake up because the 3 true outcomes are killing the game. Starting pitchers going 5 innings are killing the game. And baseball's got issues. And so they need to figure it out. Issues beyond Rob Manfred and the ridiculous thing of moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta and then having Atlanta win the World Series, right? Okay. So enough of that. You're here to talk football. But I got chased after on Twitter last night because I said, hey, man, condense the season. And everyone accused me of being a communist. So, but But it really brings up a great, well, it didn't bring up a great question. It allows me to segue into my next question here. And watching the news and watching, the sports talk stuff and sports talk scene and what's floating around out there is Dak Prescott made a statement, which I didn't think it was a bad statement. He's making so much money right now that he said, yeah, I imagine the Cowboys will include me in some discussions, I think with bonus and everything else, he made somewhere close to $70 million this year. Now, it's not going to be his base salary going forward, but he made a lot of dough. That's a lot of money to have invested in somebody. Kyler Murray, his market value, if he renegotiates, if that indeed happens, and it looks like they've done some mending offenses there in Arizona, he's 43. The Rams are talking about extending Matthew Stafford. And Matthew Stafford is worth somewhere in the order of 41 rocks. Rocks, what I mean is by millions. And you pay someone that much money, aren't they considered management? I remember when I was younger, much younger, very, very much younger. I think it was after Magic Johnson's second season. Dr. Jerry Buss signed him to a 25-year, $25 million contract. And then, of course, it would be ripped up and done up later as the economy in NBA changed. But you give someone in 1981, 25 years, $25 million deal, they're not playing basketball for 25 years. And it had an effect on the team. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he went in and spoke to Dr. Buss and said, does this make Johnson management now? Because that is such a separation. No one else was going to get anywhere near 25 years, 25 million in that day and age. Now you'll get 1 year, 25 million, and that might not even be enough, right? So you give somebody that much money disproportionate to the rest of the team, it's gonna be a deal. The money they're giving quarterbacks now in comparison to the salary cap is creating a bigger separation between them and the rest of the team. And depending how you want to break down 2021 salaries, because there's deferred, there's base, there's bonuses. I just zipped through it real quick, and I counted about 20 players who are making over 20 mil that aren't quarterbacks, in the NFL. TJ Watt is pulling down 28 mil. And of those 20 guys or so, only a couple of them, DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper, are offensive players, and they're both receivers. And it's kind of funny. I don't know if I'd want to pay DeAndre Hopkins because I wouldn't trade Cooper Kupp for DeAndre Hopkins, and I wouldn't trade Robert Woods for DeAndre Hopkins. And even though Hopkins is more talented, I like what Kupp and Woods do on an all-around basis. Those guys are complete receivers doing everything. And Hopkins has shown some ability to break down. Same thing with Amari Cooper. These guys are all great receivers. I just wouldn't pay them that much money. But when you do pay them that much money, and if you think in Hopkins' case, if he's making over 20 mil, I think I saw 27. I'm not sure. And let's just say you bump Kyler, you renegotiate Kyler. And of course, you'll backload it, and they'll do everything to manipulate it and put it more in signing bonus and spread it out. I get it. But that's an $80 to a $70 million commitment if Kyler gets market value per season. 27 and 43 is 70, right? Amari Cooper is making over 20. And can you imagine him and Dak and think about, well, we'll probably talk about it later, but it's already all over the place, is the Cowboys are in trouble with the salary cap. They got so many guys that are free agents, and they don't have the dough. And so they're going to have to make some hard cuts. If you think the Rams are going to have to make some cuts, the Cowboys are going to have to make some cuts. Of those 20 players, the rest are defenders, and not one of them is a running back. And so the world's changed. So when you're giving a guy 40 rocks or more a year to play quarterback, and the salary cap, well, this year it's at 208, but we know they're not just making 40 million, they're making 43, 45 for Mahomes. But you're making roughly 200, you have a $200 million salary cap. That's 40%. I mean, what is that? One quarter of your entire salary is going to one player. And the next closest guy, maybe one of your superstar defenders at 25, 20, maybe. And by and large, the rest of them are in the teens. By and large, the rest of them are less than 10. I think I broke down the 10 players who contributed to the Rams' win over Tampa Bay. Out of those 10 players, you combine all their salaries, it came to less than $8 million. And so it really puts the team in constant flux when the quarterback is making so much money. So the quarterback better have a say, because he's got to decide who he wants to go around, and at least you should listen to him. You have to include them in the conversation, and at that kind of money, they are management, aren't they? Aren't they management because of the financial disparity between them and the next person on their team, and how much of the pie is left in the salary cap? And that's always something to consider, is that these quarterbacks are going to a whole nother level. And obviously it's because we segue into the second part here. It's because of the salary cap. The worst thing, and this is what we were talking about with the Cowboys, is the worst thing that about the salary cap is letting players you like walk, or having to release them because you got to pay your stars, right? And you want your stars, like the Rams again. You can't give Les Snead and the scouting department and the emotional and mental eval department enough credit, because they do have guys that want to win, that were willing to restructure and redo their deals to get this team over the top. And it takes that kind of creativity and selflessness to bring that about. But there are guys that are going to go, and you can't stop it. You can't prevent it. We were sick about John Johnson last year, but it happened. It had to happen, right? This is why Andrew Whitworth is such an interesting thing going forward for the Rams. It's compelling because if he retires, he's making 17 mil next year. But if he retires, the Ram gets 16 mil back to help their cap situation. That is absolutely crucial. But then again, if he stays, well, you got to run the risk of a 41-year-old left tackle playing at the level he's played at the last couple of years. And that's really a gamble, isn't it? And so it's interesting where you want to go and what you want to do. And you'd think Whitworth would want to walk. And if he does walk, that really kind of helps the Rams situation. But besides Whitworth, do you want to know who else could be on the block? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not being Nostradamus here, or Jostradamus. But these are the things that could happen. We have a real affinity in Rams world for Johnny Hekker. We love Johnny Hekker. Johnny Hekker has just been fantastic his whole career with the Rams. But if you really break it down, he finished 14th in punting this year. Last year, which is an improvement. Last year, he was 25th in punting. There are cheaper punters out there. A Hekker makes $3 rocks a year. If you cut him, you get back 2, and 2 can be the difference. 2 can be the difference in terms of keeping somebody or losing somebody, and you can find punters at a cheaper level, and we could be saying goodbye to Johnny Hekker. So that's something to think about. Here's another one that kind of stings a little bit, but you need to think about it, is Tyler Higbee. And his name was thrown at me by someone else, which thank you very much. Tyler Higbee makes $8 million a year. But if he's cut, the Rams get back 5.2 against the salary cap. And that would really help in keeping some other critical players. And well, why would they cut Higbee? Well, they won a Super Bowl without Higbee. But the other aspect of it is Higbee can be replaced. Kendall Blanton had one game, but he was good. Bryson Hopkins showed he could either be a light tight end or a big receiver, and he produced in the Super Bowl. And then, of course, the one that everyone was in love with, you give him the Nelson Spruce award in preseason, is Jacob Harris, who didn't play. I think he played like 17 snaps this year, and I think he busted something in his arm or something. But now that really could leave the Rams outside of Blanton. I don't think Hopkins and Harris are blockers. But if they decide to keep Johnny Munt, who is also a free agent, but Munt has no market. I can't imagine anybody wanting to sign Johnny Munt. But the Rams could probably get him at a cheap deal and keep him as the blocking tight end in certain situations, pair him with Blanton. It'll be really interesting to see. But all that makes Higbee have a target, because he can be replaced. He's got some wear and tear. And the Rams get 5.2 back to help with the salary cap. Another player to think about, and it sounds almost heresy after the way he played this year, and especially how he played in January and in the Super Bowl, is A'Shawn Robinson. He was a free agent pickup a couple years ago from Detroit. He didn't do anything hardly at all last year, and he was kind of suspect going into this year. It's like, wow, we're letting Morgan Fox walk, and we don't know about Ashawn Robinson. Well, obviously the Rams knew what they were doing, right? And Ashawn Robinson was fantastic. He makes $6.5 million a year. If the Rams cut him, they get back 5.5. That's a big benefit to the salary cap that the Rams have. And but the issue there is that they have Robinson under contract for next year, but just Sebastian Joseph Day is a free agent, and it's time for him to get paid. And you wonder that they could probably pay him less than 5.5, keep him younger, and stuff, or they hold on to Ashawn and let Day walk. And so it'll be really interesting because I don't think they can keep both those guys, because the Rams have invested in this interior line. You also got Donald there, you got Greg Gaines there, but they also with any draft pick the Rams make above 6th round is a high quality pick, and they invested that into Bobby Brown III. He played a few snaps this year. He's a draft investment. He's a big dude, and again, the Rams know how to evaluate talent, and you got to figure they figure this guy might be coming. Also, Marquise Copeland, Michael Hecht, and Jonah Williams all got time along that defensive line this year. And I'm not saying any of them are as good as Sebastian Day or Ashawn Robinson, but the Rams have some depth there. And if they decide to let Ashawn go, they could be okay. They're going to be all right. And so that's where, like with Higbee, you don't want to lose him, and Robinson, you don't want to lose them, but you get back a lot of money between those two guys alone. That gets over $10 million back in the salary cap. And there's also depth at their position. An interesting one too is when you look at not necessarily cuts, but in terms of decision making. Austin Corbett and Brian Allen are free agents. We're not really going to talk about Joe Noteboom. We have talked about him before. But Austin Corbett had a really good year at guard. He was a bust as a Cleveland Brown, number 2 pick, 2nd round pick a few years ago, and the Rams got the most out of him. Brian Allen came from nowhere. Literally, he was ready to be cut. I mean, in everyone else's mind, not in the Rams' mind. He was ready to be cut, and they decided to invest in him. They let Austin Blythe walk. They didn't draft Creed Humphrey. They invested in him, and they got a top 10 performance. Both those guys are free agents. Did you know those guys combined made $2.5 million last year? You talk about how the Rams are able to do what they do. It's when you get clicks out of guys like Corbett and Allen and get them to play at an NFL level, better than competent, okay? Better than competent, okay? If there's 2 starting guards on every team, that means there's 64 starting guards in the NFL. And I think Austin Corbett finished 27th or 28th or someplace in there. And so he's in the upper tier of starting guards in the NFL. He's not at the highest tier, but he's in the upper tier. And then Brian Allen finished top 10. Market value for Austin Corbett is 8 rocks. Market value for Brian Allen is 5 rocks. That would be, and it ain't going to happen, though. I can't see it happening. That would be $13 million between those two after only making $2.5 million between them both this year. Also interesting, Coleman Shelton, who filled in for Allen when he was banged up, was a guy that bounced around, found a home with the Rams in 2019 and has served as a backup. He's a free agent also. It's interesting. Shelton this past year made $850,000. Allen made $786,000 as the starter. So you got to figure Allen wants to get paid. These guys' bodies only have so much time, and then they got to make a decision on what they're going to do. And then that brings us back to there's some buzz about Rob Havenstein. Havenstein, if he got cut, would be 4.9 in dead and something like 4.9 in savings, close to $5 million if he got cut. And that sounds crazy, but you could think that if Whitworth decides to stay, Havenstein might really be a guy that gets cut. And then you got to think about, is there room to re-sign Joseph Noteboom, who's going to have a market? Somebody is going to see him because he played high profile. He wasn't playing in Detroit. He was playing in Los Angeles, and he's filled in the last 2 years for Whitworth, and he's played well. And he could fill that left tackle spot, and so he's going to cost money to keep. But if Whitworth stays, I don't know how you keep Havenstein and expect to keep Noteboom and to put him in Havenstein's place or sign anybody else. And that's why you should keep an eye on Alaric Jackson. Remember Jackson? Remember when all the COVID stuff and everything hit the Rams? I believe it was the Cardinal game in Phoenix. Alaric Jackson was promoted, and the guy played solid ball. And the Rams have invested in him. He's one of those guys the Rams invest in and takes a couple years, takes 2 or 3 years, and then he steps up, as we've seen on the offensive side with Brian Allen, as we've seen on the defensive side with the Morgan Foxes, the Greg Gaines, and these players. So keep an eye on Alaric Jackson because Whitworth, because of financial issues the Rams are in, I think they're something like 10 mil over. I have to double check that. The Whitworth thing is a big deal. I think if Whitworth stays, the Rams may end up cutting a Havenstein, or you might see someone like Alaric Jackson line up on the right side. But I got a feeling that Whitworth will step down. So that's kind of where we're at today. We went a good 20 minutes talking Ram football. If you what's posted right now, this is going to be embedded in from the Ram Cave, which is already posted at joetarosian.com. I'll also post it separately. But on that, we broke down the Rams by position, their free agents, their returners, some of their prospects, what to think about in terms of the draft. Also, the names that have already popped in the mock drafts. The mock drafts they can be kind of silly, but the one thing the mock drafts provide is they provide that that name recognition that every fan should have, because especially the Rams. Who cares about red carpet on Thursday night? It's rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on down that are the most fascinating. And so when the Rams draft somebody, they won't be a stranger to you, and you'll have some connection with them. And I know when you see a college player that played at USC or UCLA and suddenly you see them play, you've got an investment with them, right? Because you've seen them in college. And if you could just register some of those names, and I've listed them by the round that they're being projected, doesn't mean the Rams are going to draft them. Has no bearing. It's not a prediction. It's just names that are being bantied about by other groups. Somewhere along the line in April or late March, I'll throw a projection up there. I did it last year and I was wrong on every one of them, but it's a lot of fun. And so keep that in mind and take a look at from the Ram Cave at joetarosian.com and keep hitting like. And I love your comments, and hit subscribe, share with your friends, because we're going to talk Ram football all year long. Okay, so I'm Joe Tarosian, and you can follow me at Joe Tarosian at JoeT13B at Twitter, on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. And of course, this is the RamView. It's on Joe T Sports on YouTube and joetarosian.com. If you want to be part of my newsletter, which is based more on my writing, like books, I wrote Tangent Dreams a few years ago. I've done about 5 more books, but this is my key football book. I did one other one. That's also, you can get all those books on Amazon, and my newsletter at jtbank1964 at Yahoo is if you want to join my newsletter, you can send me a request and I'll put you on my newsletter. All right, folks. Hey, I want to say thank you. And like I said, I'm not going to do music today. One of the things we've been doing is experimenting on working on morphing this into a podcast, and we're getting there. I'm hopefully by the end of next week. Don't know for sure, but that's kind of where we want to be, and then get on the right platforms and all that stuff. So until then, thank you for clicking on. I'll see you Monday, but I'll be in a different environment. I'm working a camp, a youth camp this weekend, and I'll probably be with little headphones on, and it'll look a lot different, but we'll still be talking a little bit of Ram football. Okay, Monday through Friday. God bless. Take care.